Okay, so hello and welcome. I'm really genuinely thrilled to be here today. It's a really important discussion to be happening alongside the AI Summit conversations, where it's possible, let's say, that they will be less focused than we are in this room on participation, on democratizing AI, on ensuring people's perceptions, views, hopes, and concerns are represented in decision making. So I'm super happy to be here thinking these things through with you people. I'm also honored to be chairing among so many respected thinkers and actors in this space. And my panel. So I'm very pleased to be introducing this panel on participatory AI governance, particularly because it holds space for some voices that are less frequently heard. We had a panelist who was coming from Uganda who was not able to join us. So also to remember, despite the efforts of the organizers, that there are some people who are also not in this room at the moment. But I wanted to talk to us quickly. Just try and get my slides to move on. Is it a click? Oh yeah, here we go. So I want to talk to us quickly. Sit closer to the mic. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to talk quickly about governance and set out some first principles that I hope will help us think together through the day about some common themes, both in the presentations that we're about to hear, but also to carry these thoughts through the day. And to start with political theory makes a distinction between government and governance. This may be like, political theory 101 to some of you in the room, in which case I apologize, but I think it's important to say. So these are ways of making sense of and structuring global order. And we can think, and scholars like James Rosenau are foundational here, about government being activities that are backed by formal authority. And then governance being activities that are backed by shared goals and reliant on voluntary adoption and compliance. So real distinction there. When you're talking about technology, of course, all of this is taking place in a system where technology is also shaping social order. So governance is an interesting and an important site for exploration, emerging not through a centralized or democratically appointed authority, but from interactions of what Rosenau helpfully calls overlapping spheres of authority, encouraging the spread of norms and informal rules. So at a global or national level, these norms are not themselves laws or regulations, but they can influence both national and supranational social and political issues and inform the development of regulation by governance. So how's that useful to us? When we think about the roles of organized and mediated participation in AI governance, well, we're concerned, in the words of OECD, not just with the safety of AI technologies, but the socio-economic, cultural and political complexities that predate and are exacerbated by them. We recognize, and I think this is uncontentious in this room, that the market will not on its own deliver solutions for these intractable challenges, and that governance is a highly politicized concept that interfaces with other ideas that we all care about, like democracy, like fairness, like legitimacy. So these kinds of softer governance mechanisms are carrying a lot of weight. They're seeking to manage the risks and benefits of technologies in ways that deliver equitable benefits which align with people's hopes and concerns. But it's not straightforward power. They're operating relationally through non-hierarchical systems of organizations that don't have direct authority in a multi-level system of supranational, I wish I hadn't put that word in, I can't say it, and non-state organizations. So good question is, who might be involved in these kind of governance and what roles might they take? We've heard today about lots of these actors. We can think about national and international NGOs, civil society organizations, UN agencies, exclusive groupings like the G7 or the G20, the WHO, the IMF, who cooperate to further shared interests through acceptance of principles, norms, rules, and processes. One of the mechanisms available to them, alongside expert consultation, advocacy, is public participation. So where does public participation sit in governance alongside these other players? And what tensions do we see? And what pathways do we see? And how can we leverage the affordances of public participation, legitimacy, trust, accountability, inclusiveness, connectedness, to improve governance outcomes for everyone? What methods might we use and at what scale? And how can organizations in positions of power be encouraged to use these models? What questions is public participation well placed to address? Is it the safety questions that are so preoccupying government? Is it public benefit? I think we're going to hear a lot about that at the AI Summit this week. But I invite you to think about that just as we listen to the provocations from our discussants today. Where are they pointing to evidence and learnings that support effectiveness and ability to create change? And where might they need to leverage shared authority in order to get to the change that they want? So I also want to first point to click and speak at the same time. It's a skill I don't have. I want to first point you to 4 insights from the Ada Lovelace Institute's work. This is where I work in this area. So bearing in mind that Ada is a UK and Brussels-based organisation, most of the empirical work that we do is based in the UK. We've just finished a survey. We know from our ongoing survey work that UK people's views are reasonably consistent over time when it comes to the benefits of AI, but the levels of concern in the UK are rising. We know that. And as is identification of legislation as the mechanism that will make them comfortable with AI development. We've also conducted some synthesis research across broader jurisdictions. I want to talk about findings of 2 reports, one co-authored with Anna Colom, who is here, and I think presenting a paper later today, and also building on the work of Rima Patel, also here and chairing a workshop. So we have 2 critical points here from what does the public think about AI. One is that in the minds of publics, there isn't one AI. So AI isn't this homogeneous thing that policymakers talk about as if it is a single problem to be solved. From public perspectives, their hopes, concerns, views depend on specific technologies and their uses, and different demographics have really nuanced views. So UK publics, for example, are much more positive about AI using cancer detection than they are about driverless cars. And then secondly, there's this gap in understanding about how public participation contributes to outcomes and what methods are appropriate. So the extensive work represented in forums like this, and it's brilliant to hear all the work that's going on. We're public participation enthusiasts. I proudly identify myself as a public participation enthusiast. Some of that work is not legible to policymakers. They can't understand the evidence and they can't understand how to do the work. A couple more points from a report called Participatory and Inclusive Data Stewardship. So there's this groundswell of bottom-up participatory projects that we see around the world. People and communities who see taking an active role in governance as a means to rebalance power with private companies, local governments, and others. There's also really strong incentives for governments to mobilize large-scale data about people, citizens, for public benefit. It's got the potential to be transformative for health outcomes, for social welfare provision. It's really important that this happens. It also needs to be done with care to ensure that the connection to real people and their lives, their rights, their freedoms aren't lost in the enthusiasm to crunch data into big solutions to these intractable problems. So all of that to say, just to pose one final question, which is what are the ways that public participation and we gathered here today can contribute to better AI governance? And we're very fortunate to have 3 talks here today. We've got 2 speakers, but 3 talks. Very different scholars in distinct organizations and roles. We'll hear next from our 3 sets of provocateurs. I'm going to invite you also to put your questions on these AHA slides online tool. So there's a QR code here. Please do add your questions, and in a participatory spirit also you can upvote, you can say what questions you want to be heard, and of course we will listen to that and take those questions in order. So without further ado from me, I am going to hand over to Suzy and Lionel first. Do you want to? We're going to try and stay on the stage. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hi there, everybody. I'm Suzy Madigan. I work for an international humanitarian NGO, Care International. So we operate in over 100 countries, providing disaster relief, tackling poverty, and working on social justice. So we spend a lot of time responding and analysing and responding to socioeconomic drivers and impacts. And as AI is both a reflection and a driver of socioeconomics, we have to get comfortable with this being part of our work now. And one key ambition of the research that we're going to present today is to start bridging perspectives between global South, civil society, policymakers, and the private sector in relation to AI, which is why I'm extremely happy to be sitting next to Lionel Bodin today.
Thanks a lot, Suzy. So my name is Lionel Bodin. I work for Accenture, the consulting company, and I am the Europe lead of a unit that focuses on social and economic impact. And one of the drivers of the research we did together was the fact that, we see that in the world, and there was some allusion in the question, is that AI is a battleground for economic giants. And in that race, the voices of the Global South are often unheard. And so that's why we decided to partner together, CARE with its strong focus on local communities, on locally led solutions, and Accenture, which is known as an actor that brings AI to scales within organization and within society. And our collaboration was driven by the shared interest in the tension that surrounds AI. One may argue that AI is a neutral tool. We think it has some intrinsic values. And for instance, maybe a natural bias towards efficiency. And how do you balance, efficiency when the goal of your initiative is to empower communities, is to build long-term resilience? And so that's why we embark in a research journey. Of course, trying to minimize biases, that always exist when a global North research team is trying to transcribe the voices from CSOs in the Global South. But we think, that the conversation will spark some interesting discussion. We hope it will inspire more local AI research. And I hand over to Suzy to unveil, so what we found in our exploration.
Thanks, Lionel. So, as Lionel explained, we combined insights from Global South civil society organizations, CSOs, with perspectives from international NGOs, INGOs, UN agencies, and technology multinational corporations, tech MNCs, plus an in-depth literature review. So our research spans 4 pathways for increasing successful civil society participation in AI decision-making across the AI lifecycle and through AI governance. So pathway 1, AI literacy. Well, it's not just about learning how to use AI tools, it's also about the human impact, of course. And we identified that CSOs and INGOs needed help and want help to increase literacy across their organizations. And they also see a need to empower communities to use AI effectively while understanding its risks, with CSOs being perfectly placed to make AI literacy programs relevant to communities because of their contextual understanding. So as AI literacy is both technical and social, private and public organizations really need to build engagement strategies with CSOs to exchange knowledge between and among sectors. Now, 2, increasing localized decision-making. We're missing a huge opportunity right now. CSOs have deep community knowledge and networks to facilitate participatory AI. It's a very efficient way to reach the community through CSOs. But the key question is about how to increase participation to ensure it's meaningful and equitable and leads to localized decision-making across the AI lifecycle, from problem identification all the way through ultimately to deployment, evaluation, and so on. And strengthening advocacy. How do we make sure specific and contextual impacts on different communities are addressed? Well, Global South CSOs have huge amounts to contribute, clearly. So enabling them to have a say means achieving effective representative advocacy on the impacts and outcomes of AI tools and programs. And while AI can help tackle social issues, AI will rarely be the whole solution. So it's important to let diverse groups paint the full picture and in the heart of decision-making spaces. And for AI systems to improve societal outcomes, two elements are essential: effective digital infrastructure and quality data. Well, needless to say, addressing digital and data divides means not only improving infrastructure, but also tackling structural inequalities. So Global South CSOs can identify when communities are excluded from data systems or included without rights or fair benefits. And we can also learn from the way different organizations and regions are innovating in using, say, citizen-generated data to inform policy. So for communities to participate equitably in data ecosystems beyond being viewed as data sources or end users or digital workers, they must have agency in how their data is collected and used. So what did our research participants tell us? Well, the research is packed with verbatim quotes, so do go to that and have a read what the diverse participants and organizations told us. But on our first pathway, almost every participant from every sector said that holistic AI literacy is critical. And CSOs and INGOs want greater literacy to make informed decisions about AI and mitigate harms. And related to this, one tech MNC stated that although they conduct human rights due diligence, AI deployers like aid agencies also have a responsibility to understand if they're using AI in a way that creates risks. And on understanding AI's potential and its limits, CSOs and INGOs also told us that while AI might help towards some social challenges, it could support girls' education, for example, it can't solve a structural problem like gender inequality that prevents girls going to school. So that's why stakeholders need to collaborate and share knowledge across sectors to build socio-technical literacy that's both technically and socially informed. And in terms of decision making, why does it matter whether we bring civil society into decision making? Well, as one INGO told us, it's not only about equity, voice, and dignity, it's also the only way you're going to develop effective solutions. But different participants highlighted various barriers to this. CSOs can think that tech companies are too profit-focused. And as one tech MNC told us, they worry about being or being perceived to be extractive if they engage communities. So to overcome this, it's important to consider how shared decision and participatory AI is conducted to ensure it's empowering and reciprocal. And on advocacy, CSOs are experienced advocates, but too few are applying their contextual knowledge and lived experiences to the gaps in AI conversations or being invited to do so, as we can see in this quote up here. So CSOs know their communities, but they need more evidence-based research on how AI is impacting them, but they're stretched by pressing needs or limited funding. But tech MNCs were also telling us that they wanted to hear evidence from CSOs and develop ideas together so they can influence their own technology companies on responsible AI from within. And then lastly, on pathway 4, in terms of access to AI opportunities, one Colombian CSO summarized a basic truth about connectivity, but it's also about representation in data. So a Yemen CSO didn't think it likely that data from vulnerable communities who barely have anything to eat would be inputted into systems. Therefore, they worried that AI isn't only unrepresentative, but also outputs misinformation about Global South communities. So in terms of recommendations, what can different stakeholders do across the pathways based on their scope, resources, and access? So many recommendations in the report, but just to close, I'll close my section. I'll just summarize a few. So for tech MNCs, embrace the responsibility you hold not only to be responsible builders of AI, but also contributors to a responsible AI ecosystem, and recognize the social, reputational, and economic benefits that can come with that. So embracing a participatory AI through the AI lifecycle and engaging and learning from local communities and civil society. For INGOs and UN agencies, our sector is trying to localize and decolonize aid. And we have the same responsibility when it comes to AI. We need to empower communities to lead in shaping AI's trajectory, just as we try with the other issues that impact them. And we should use our advantaged position to support communities through convening, advocacy, and programming. And for CSOs, well, CSOs are well placed to help the community raise their own understanding about AI, particularly with financial support. And on advocacy, they have a key role to play in raising awareness about the different impacts on diverse groups, and as a minimum across genders. And lastly, donors can invest in local evidence and evidence gathering and decision making, giving direct support to local groups, women-led organizations, for example. And they can also make responsible and participatory AI mandatory criteria for program funding and discouraging tech solutionism. So overall, much of this is about bridging divides, collaborating and putting ourselves into other mindsets in relation to AI, which is an excellent moment to pass back to Lionel to share our final.
I'm conscious about the time. So the main key takeaway is that, we encourage you to read, the report, and we discover some very deep mental models, that we have displayed here. And maybe you find yourself, in this mental model. We think AI is pervasive, and even everyone has an idea about AI. They might not express it, so they don't care, So I think Jeremy was mentioning that, but when you explain, that they are exposed, through social media, chatbots, a lot more, than in the global north, yeah. So they come with these ideas. And the key takeaway is basically any participatory AI mechanism should tackle this deep belief, yeah. If you don't, tackle that, then, you won't get, the meaningful collaboration. So that's the main message. And well, we hope, that the recommendation of the report will give some hints on how to make that, so very concrete. Thanks, for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Suzy and Lionel. I now invite Andreas and colleagues. Would you like to?
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Cirone. I am a professor at the London School of Economics, and I served in an advisory role for the community forums, which we're going to talk to you about today. My research studies deliberative democracy and how to better design democratic institutions. And I really think that the community forums are a good example of taking the best practices from academia and policymaking, and then combining them into a tool that is really pushing the forefront of innovations in the deliberative online governance space. And we know from academic research, and everyone in this room realizes that deliberative mini publics and participatory activities are really beneficial for participants, and they serve as a rich input into policymaking. But to frame our conversation on the community forums, I would like to emphasize the potential of deliberative online governance as a new tool, a tool that can be done at scale, so involving kind of thousands of people in these activities from all over the world, which means we're getting new voices that might not have been heard from before. And also online activities like this can respond better to really salient issues in policymaking, like AI, issues that are fast moving, where you need to be flexible, where you really want to involve a large set of participants. And thanks to the community forums and a lot of rich data we're getting from the community forums, we've also been able to conduct research that shows that there's really no difference between in-person deliberation and online deliberation. So there's no trade-off, right? So they're different tools and we can use them in different ways. And finally, so really the future is here. We see that there's a deliberative wave in governments and regimes and democratic institutions like citizens' assemblies, deliberative mini publics. Those are increasing across the world, but also there's a deliberative wave in tech. So industry leaders are now realizing the potential of these types of tools to bring user input into their governance. And so it's a really, really exciting time. And now I'll turn it over to colleagues to discuss what the community forums are and what the recent ones found with respect to AI.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ali. I am Andreas Katsanevas. I'm a tech policy researcher at Meta on the governance team. We are conducting these community forums, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, and then we're going to also discuss the results and implications for impact. So the community forum design is really based on Stanford's, and Ali Sue here is the co-director of the Deliberative Democracy Lab at Stanford University. We rely on Stanford and collaborate with them and borrow their model to design the community forums. I'm going to talk a little bit about the method here. We recruit a representative sample of participants from target countries, and the participants spend a week reading educational materials on the issues at hand. This is really important to us to provide some education because the representative members of the population, as some presenters talked about before, may or may not know a lot about how AI is used, what it is, what are the domains in which it's sort of utilized. And Stanford helps us in getting these educational materials vetted by experts from different points of view, so that we can provide a balanced information around AI and its applications. During the forum, which is conducted on Stanford's proprietary platform, it's online. Participants deliberate in groups of 8 to 10 people for approximately 10 to 12 hours in total. And participants engage in third-party experts to clarify questions that arose during the deliberations. We don't just do deliberations between the participants, we then have them speak with experts who are also come from different sides, from civil society, from industry, from government, and have different viewpoints on these topics to ask, and the participants can ask questions. And finally, they reflect about what they have learned with one another and share their opinions on the issues at hand, share them publicly. Stanford posts the results online. We also take the results and share it internally with Meta designers, policy people, and anyone else who's working on these topics. So a lot of the questions that I get and a lot of the questions that arise at this conference, and I think they're very valid questions, is like, what's in it for Meta? What does Meta do these community forums? So one of them is sort of the principle of the company that's across all company products, and it's amplifying user voice. Community forums, this kind of citizens' assemblies, are a different way to amplify user voice in a way that sort of can help people discuss complex issues, consider hard choices, and share recommendations for improving people's experiences across our apps. Another one is trust. When people participate in sharing their opinions about a product, that has shown many times over that it increases trust on the institution that develops those products. Another related factor is transparency. We do this publicly. Again, we post the results, and we're willing to hear anybody else out there in the world who wants to give us feedback on the results, consult us. We're open to listening to your feedback. And then it's a novel. The interesting thing about this, doing it in a corporate setting, is that they provide novel insights. They're not UX. UX research is great in terms of surveys. We do focus groups. We do all these kind of things. But deliberative insights are a different kind of form of consultation, a different kind of getting insight about our products. In these sort of deliberations, people are polled for their impressions. Oh, sorry. In user research, people are pulled for their impressions, but don't necessarily have familiarity with the subject matter. And with community forums, we can have foresight into how people's views on AI might unfold. I'll pass it on to Alice Sue, talk a little bit about the results.
Thank you. The method of community forums is based on deliberative polling, which our lab has deployed in the last 30 years, and it's been in 50 countries, a couple hundred projects. We do these events in person and online. And what you see here is the first partnership we had with Meta in 2022. It was a global deliberative poll, 32 countries, 19 languages, and over 6,000 people deliberated. We had a deliberation group and a control group. So in total, 14,000 people from around the world. A lot of data that we can share and we can talk more about afterwards. In the next year, in 2023, we started discussions about AI. We did a 4-country deliberation, completely oversubscribed. We budgeted for 800 people. We got close to 1,600 attend. And we can talk about that, how we paid for that later on. And then in 2024, we expanded that. We did 5 countries and global majority countries. And we had over close to 1,000 people attend over the 5 countries. And just to share a little bit about the results in the next slide is...
Sorry, I've been moving the slides too fast.
Oh, no, you can keep going.
Where do you want to be?
Next slide. We're going to speed through and go to the results.
Here.
Just to share a little bit, and I know that a lot of folks want to know about what people are finding in these deliberations. And I want to say that it's actually very consistent with the previous panel and what the speakers had shared. There's a lot of interest in AI tools and technologies. This is from the 2023 event where we did 4 countries, lots of positive and optimistic views. And in the 5-country one we did last year, we don't have the results public yet. They'll be available very soon. There was over a 10% increase across the 5 countries in terms of optimism and positive impact that AI will have. And note, not here, but we did ask what negative impact they thought AI would have too. And that is available in the report. So I keep that in suspense. In the next slide, I added one question that we added in 2023 about whether participants favored the use of chatbots in having the chatbots provide kind of emotional support using conversational tactics. And you can see that only if the user is informed, and the green that you see, that green is the increase in agreement if there was consent from the user. And this is true across the country. And when we asked that in the 2024 deliberation as well, there was also very similar results. So we find very consistent results across the 9 countries. And to add that, I don't have a slide here, but the findings of the previous speakers about having cultural relevance and in making sure that the tools are really culturally representative is also true in the 9 countries that we asked. And I think the next slide belongs to our colleague here, Jess.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jess Heel. I'm a researcher in trust and safety in the GenAI product org. So I've been partnering particularly on the first AI community forum to really kind of help develop the questions and then really try and internalize the insights. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact and how we go about that. It's not sort of a static process. You don't sort of, not yet, produce a report and sort of let it go. It's a kind of a continual and evolving and relational process. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit about what that looks like. So firstly, these insights, which are very sort of high level, they're not telling us what kind of pixels to push or how to the specifics of like aligning a model. It sort of helps inform on our product strategy. So what I mean by that is when we're planning, how we go about prioritizing particular routes to explore as a product team together when we plan for our sort of year and half years. It then sort of subsequently informs our design framework. So how we set up our design team and really think about what the user problems are and what the user needs are for the products that that we're developing, and how can we really situate those user needs to ensure that the users and these kind of insights are at the heart of the design process, where explorations and sort of design sprints. And then sort of one of the main last ones is around sort of decision making. So we have a lot of leadership decision making to help our prioritization. And these insights, alongside we have a lot of other researchers and data scientists. How do we pull these insights all together to help inform our leadership to make the right prioritization and decisions for the next stages? Yeah, and I think some of the impact as well has really been sort of the evolution of these community forums, and we're continually seeing additional markets, voices from the global south and underrepresented groups. This is really helpful and really ensures that we are embedding as many users' voices as possible in matters that affect them in sort of day-to-day product decision making. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't think we can keep everyone on the stage.
No,
we will invite at least some of you back for the questions. But can I invite Eloïse up to the stage? Oh, and do please remember to put your questions onto the app. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I realize that I'm between you and your coffee, so I'm going to go very, very quickly in my presentation. So let me get that here. So basically, I'm here to show you, so we've seen from the public side, we've seen from Meta's side, and I'm here to show you from the academy side as well, how we can apply deliberation for GenAI governance. So basically, on my personal side, so 6-7 years ago, I started applying deliberative and participatory practices to with local governments on topics that go from climate change to health to urban landscapes, etc. So by doing that, I used a democratically governed tool called Decidim that some of you might know. And I explored more and more throughout the years the ways technology could be governed in a democratic way. And so that's where I went quickly into participatory and deliberative AI governance. This meant exploring how deliberative practices in general could be integrated at each step of the AI cycle. And what I'm going to show you now is a small-scale experimentation where I organized a students' assembly on GenAI at the Edinburgh Futures Institute last year. And basically the objectives of the research projects were twofold. It was exploring why the growing GenAI use in higher education was a complex issue itself, so defining complexity of the issue, and assessing to what extent deliberative practices could actually help collectively tackle such complexity. It is worth noting that the growing use of generative AI in higher education is an issue that universities are really struggling to address. Their policy are generally done very quickly, and they don't know whether to be anti-AI, pro-AI. They don't know whether to be experimental or not. Also, there's a taboo that remains around students. They don't usually say that they've been using GenAI. They feel a bit guilty saying that. So the goal of the Students' Assembly was also to liberate the voices around GenAI use in higher education. So I'm gonna skip to that. So this is the timeline. If you have any questions on that after, I'll respond, but otherwise I'll go quickly through it. So it was over a few months of organization. This is the design of the deliberative assembly. So it was first a pre-deliberative workshop that we've organized with students to select the topic of the assembly. That was done in April 2024. Then the final deliberative question was chosen. There was also a police poll that was opened to get opinions around what they felt around GenAI use at university and higher education. There was also some interview experts done in parallel to have to kind of curate that students' assembly. And finally, the students' assembly in June. And after that, the final report that got published during the summer around September 2024 as well. So the main question of the students' assembly was the following. So how can we reimagine teaching, learning, and research methods to align with the advancements in AI and ethics. It is a small scale one, but I think the most interesting part is not, so it was 2 days, 5 sessions that were consecutive. The lineup of the sessions were deliberate, so I'll explain in questions if you want. And there was 17 students, online and in person. We had 8 disciplines, so that was something very important for me to have both sociology and computer scientists, data and AI ethicists, psychologists. So we had a good range of disciplines in the room. And there were 8 experts involved, both internal to the university and external to the university. And yeah, that was the students' assembly. Then the findings. Now, this is where I want to spend the most time. So organizing a students' assembly to address a complex issue. So we need to define what a complex issue is, right? So we're going to delve into what the black box of deliberation is, because usually people say, I've done deliberation, but don't explain what the techniques were. Basically, the reason why we chose this issue with students is that there's 2 things. GenAI use in higher education is usually a topic that has a wide range of deeply held opinions. There was a study that said that the more technically complex an issue is, or perceived technically complex, the more emotional people get about the topic. So the opinions that we got from both the police and from the Students' Assembly showed that there was deeply held opinions about AI, whether pro-regulation, anti-regulation, pro-experimentation, anti-experimentation, et cetera, at university. And so how the Students' Assembly addressed them is to do 4 things. What we found was to acknowledge and map disagreements. So the first thing we did starting the Students' Assembly was to show the disagreements that were in the room. Then it was about implementing facilitation techniques. So to avoid, for example, that dominant voices like superseded all the other opinions. Then understanding members' disciplinary assumptions. I think that's something we do at university, but we don't do generally when we're having discussions, is what discipline do you come from and which assumptions do you have in this conversation? So for example, computer scientists with regards to GenAI usually valued a lot performance and security, whereas students from education or philosophy valued other things. So we really spent time mapping disciplinary assumptions. And then we spent quite a lot of time as well creating commonality. So that means when we map disagreements, we need to find the shared kind of values and emotions. When I talk about emotions, is because the output of the Students' Assembly was a final list of principles, and that sounded very high level when we started discussing it. So what we decided was to ground those high level principles in daily experiences and personal experiences. I'm going to show you after how we sequenced emotions to values, values to principles, and we ended up with that final list of principles. So the second dimension of a complex issue is that it's long-term and uncertain in its implications. And so what helped with the Students' Assembly was to involve a wide range of perspectives and disciplines so that we could have a good image of all those implications. Was exploring future scenarios. So we did do a future thinking workshop where one of the professors at the University of Edinburgh had done the work of establishing 8 future scenarios for a datafied university. So we looked at those scenarios and kind of explored them in the question of the Students' Assembly. And we looked at current GenAI uses. So I told everyone to look at their GenAI ChatGPT history and map all the ways they were using ChatGPT or other tools. So the emotions mapping, that was, one of the findings that we had was half of the students, more students were feeling relief, and curiosity, excitement, surprise, what else? Yeah, relaxed. And the other sides of the emotions were scared, feeling replaced, stress, etc. So there was a variety of emotions. Then, yeah, that's the sequencing I wanted to tell you about. So, for example, what we did in writing those final principles for the GenAI use was to map the emotions first. So for example, someone who felt shameful, guilty, or accountable is because they valued integrity in education, integrity in learning, or they felt that they valued intentionality in general when they were approaching their studies. And which meant that led to another principle, which is we believe in upholding the integrity of education. And then the principle below it. The second types of emotions, curious, excited, inspired, led to more creativity, innovation, playfulness. And those are the values that those people were valuing the most. And the principle that led to was we value experimentation at the university, and we believe in embracing emerging technologies, et cetera. I'll let you read the principles if you want to. So that's the future thinking. That's also, I don't think we have the time, but this is how the ecosystem of experts that were interviewed as well helped in addressing the complexity of the problem. So by addressing the unpredictability, the emergence of the problem, the flexibility and unclear solutions, the interdependence of the ecosystem, the fact that it was context specific as well. So all the informants kind of helped in that process. And I think that should be part of deliberative processes to include as most like all the stakeholders as possible so that you could actually address all the facets of a complex problem. And I'll show you after that. So if you want to see the final list of principles, there's a website called the Students Assembly on GenAI.com. So if you want to go check the work that was done, there's also details on the timeline, the principles, the acknowledgements, and who participated and the experts that did. And finally, I'll say the limitations because I think it's important. It is a small scale exercise. Even though it's small scale, I think it's important that we had all the disciplines in it. Also, it's not randomly selection because I didn't have access to student data. So it was on the voluntary base. But having that said, there was gender parity. I think there was even more. It was 60% of women in the room. We did have some representation of disciplines, which was important for me as well. So I think at that point, when you can't do random selection, you need to find a threshold of your criteria that you want as a representation in the room. The implementation mechanisms, that wasn't sponsored by the University of Edinburgh, so basically it was unpaid work on my end. But it is being implemented by the university, so it's part now. The principles that were written by students are part of the university's policy, so that was a good thing, even though it wasn't paid again. So. And then future research generally and how you can institutionalize those kind of exercises, because here it was an ad hoc process. But yeah, anyway, so if you have any questions, happy to answer. This is a website, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eloïse. Stay where you are, and can other panelists come back onto the stage in slightly smaller numbers than you came up last time? Please. We've got a lot of questions. Many of them relate to Meta in particular and the complexities of Meta's position. I think I might just acknowledge that rather than spending time on those questions, because we've got so many interesting questions about participation and about how that operates. So as I invite people back, can I start with a question? One more person. Can I start with a question? So speakers so far have spoken about the importance of culturally sensitive or bottom-up approaches in designing AI, and yet most AI technologies aim for scale. Is this a circle that can't be squared? Would anybody like to take that?
I could give it a shot.
Start with a big question.
I think that's a really good question, actually. It's something that we're really thinking about as we design these participatory methods. One of the things that we find, and we see with a lot of this work, is that they are expensive, they take time, and that's not necessarily the fact that they take time is not necessarily a bad thing. People need to take time to think about these things and deliberate, but hopefully the cost over time we could sort of try to find ways to minimize it. One of the things we want to do going forward is to think through the operational part of all these community assemblies, the community forums that we do, and trying to find ways to minimize the cost so that we can scale it. But this is many years. It's a process. It will take years, but we're aware of this issue and we want to work on it.
No, I guess one of the answers, I was at the ISA conference yesterday, and Google DeepMind researcher were talking about how they develop their AI for deliberation in general. So I guess one of the answers, obviously, is to use AI to scale deliberation. But as a first deliberative practitioner that was doing mostly face-to-face deliberation, I am going to defend like hybrid deliberation. I think it is important. On the other end, I think there's a question that we could ask is, do we need to scale those exercises, or do we just need to multiply them locally and kind of push for education around deliberation around those topics so that local initiatives can be diffused? So maybe not scale one exercise, but multiply multiple those exercises across countries and regions. And I think that's what's happening already on multiple topics. AI is, I think, the 13th ranked topic in the deliberative wave. So maybe put technology more into deliberation, but I think otherwise, yeah, those two answers could do.
We could go on to the next question. I'm getting a lot of pushback in the room for skipping the meta question. So I feel like maybe we will come back to that if everybody's okay to spend time on that. So I have a question. How have the meta community forums changed what meta actually does? In particular, has it stopped any particular uses of AI by Meta? And if there were changes, how did you get those adopted internally?
It's a good question, and one we can't answer specifically due to, you know, proprietary information. Unfortunately, no, it's a difficult question. But I can say, and what I spoke to a little bit was like, I know there have been instances where information has been fed into decision making at the highest level. And it's also difficult to say, you know, these things aren't done in a vacuum. There's not just like one insight we can use. There is a bunch of other contextual information and data and context that all inform this. But it has been in the room for the top decision making, is what I can say.
Can I just add to that? Again, in line with my previous comment, I see this as a positive trajectory that we didn't have community forums a few years ago. Now we do. We did a pilot 3 years ago. Then we did a global one. So and then when making inroads with internal stakeholders and changing minds takes time. So, you know, if you think about it from this perspective, it's a positive development. We're not perfect, and we're coming peace. So, but sort of like if you look at it from like the longer term, I think there's a lot of potential here, and it fits with the broader public wave of the deliberative wave, and we hope to be able to catch some of that to advance our efforts.
Thank you. There's a few more sort of methodological questions coming through, so I'm going to pick one of them. It's actually about the deliberative forums, but I wonder if we can broaden it out. So for the deliberative forums, how do you select the materials that participants read to try to maintain a balanced perspective and so not to prime participants' opinions? I don't know if all of you could answer that.
I'll pause for you on this one because you've been doing those forums.
I don't know, Jess, do you want to take that or should
I mean, I can talk to it quickly, briefly. So from our perspective, we use a lot of, we don't do it ourselves. We work with external partners, and we also work with those partners, then also review the materials, and they're publicly available as well, I think. So you can go and have a look at them. I think they're really great, actually. Yeah, and they're reviewed with independent experts as well. So we don't do it ourselves, is basically the answer.
If I can just jump in here as the third party here, I'm not bound by any corporations here. So just to share the briefing materials and the proposals that are created, you know, we don't only work with Meta, we've worked with the Taiwanese government. We've worked with a number of other NGOs on the topics of AI. And so we collect
the pertinent topics of AI and transmit them and say, these are the most important issues that people are dealing with now. Can we put these into future community forums? And from those, we create advisory committees that are independent and review the processes and the proposals. And in the briefing materials, and I hope that you all look at them, there are pros and cons that are equally weighted in the documents so that people that are reviewing them can see that the different arguments that there are. Of course, they're not complete, but they're starter conversations, and all the reviewers are listed in the briefing materials as well, so that the participants can review and see what their affiliations are. And I just wanted to add on the first question while I have the mic, that, I am also very concerned about Meta, whether they are going to use the findings, yes, as well. And my take on it is that, we would not be continuing this collaboration if there was not internal interest within the company. And you may have seen on the slide, there was democratic inputs from OpenAI, there was an Anthropic deliberation about constitutional AI, but those were great steps in the right direction, but there have not been very much follow-up in terms of what happens then. And so the fact that we've done 3, and I hope that there will be more, and it sets a very good path to what democratic inputs can look like and what AI participation looks like in this field of governance. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid we now have to wrap up. We've run out of time. Thank you for all your questions. I encourage you to seek out the panelists and ask your questions if you feel they haven't been answered, and also to know that those are really important to the data that's being collected about this event, so they will feed into the reporting. So thank you very much indeed, and to the panelists as well.